Hello, everyone. I hope you're ready for another reading. I cozied up this area even more. As you can see, I have my nice Legend of Zelda Spirit Stone throw pillars with me, as well as a pillow that my friend made a while back, who's amazing and has really great art. Don't worry too much about it. She's just gonna sit over here. Yes, welcome back. I am liking this setup, so I think this is how the setup's gonna be. I should probably actually turn on that light. Oh god, it's falling. Don't worry, everything's fine. Everything's okay. I just grabbed that a little bit too. Nope, it's falling again. Anyway, don't worry. I can always edit this out, but I won't, because why would I? Anyway, now I should be able to read just fine. Oh, the light is it was over here before. Now it's up there. I think this works out okay. Anyway, without any further ado, gosh, I'm terrible at audiobooks because I talk too much beforehand, but I hope you guys don't mind. It has a little flavor. And if I ever do actual audiobooks, it'll just be pure recording of my voice, so that'll be a lot easier, I guess. Don't worry about it too much. Clouds piled up over the mountains. Bildor strode up and down the first field, using one of the ordinary farm scythes. The sharpest one had been temporarily stored at the back of the barn, in case it was blunted by air convection. Some of Miss Flitworth's tenants followed behind him, binding the sheaves and stacking them. Miss Flitworth had never employed more than one man full-time, Bildor learned. She brought in other help as she needed it, to save pennies. "Never seen a man cut corn with a scythe before," said one of them. "It's a sickle job." They stopped for lunch and ate it under the hedge. Bildor had never paid a great deal of attention to the names and faces of people, beyond that necessary for business. Corn stretched over the hillside. It was made up of individual stalks, and to the eye of one stalk, another stalk might be quite an impressive stalk, with a dozen amusing and distinctive little mannerisms that set it apart from all other stalks. But to the reaper man, all stalks start off as just stalks. Now he was beginning to recognize little differences. There was William Spigot and Gabby Wheels and Duke Bottomley, all old men, as far as Bildor could judge, with skins like leather. There were younger men and women in the village, but at a certain age they seemed to flip straight over to being old without passing through any intermediate stage. And they stayed old for a long time. Miss Flitworth had said that before they could start a graveyard in these parts, they'd had to hit somebody over the head with a shovel. William Spigot was the one who sang when he worked, breaking into that long nasal whine, which meant that folk song was about to be perpetrated. Gabby Wheels never said anything. This, Spigot had said, was why he had been called Gabby. Bildor had failed to understand the logic of this, although it seemed transparent to the others. And Duke Bottomley had been named by parents with an upwardly mobile, if rather simplistic idea about class structure. His brothers were Squire, Earl, and King. Now they sat in a row under the hedge, putting off the moment when they'd need to start work again. A glugging noise came from the end of the row. "It's not been a bad old summer, then," said Spigot. "No, and a good harvest weather for a change." Many a slip twixt dress and drawers," said Duke. "Last night I saw a spider spinning its web backward. That's sure sign there's going to be a dreadful storm." "Don't see how spiders know things like that." Gabby Wheels passed a big earthenware jug to Bildor. Something sloshed. "What is this?" "Apple juice," said Spigot. The others laughed. "Oh," said Bildor. "Strong distilled spirits given humorously to the unsuspecting newcomer, thus to afford simple amusement when he becomes inadvertently inebriated." "Core," said Spigot. Bildor took a long swig. "And I saw swallers flying, no," said Duke, "and partridges are heading for the woods, and then there's a lot of big snails, and—" "I don't reckon any of them buggers know the first thing about meteorology," said Spigot. "I reckon you goes around telling 'em, and that's big storm coming, Mr. Spider, so go on and do something folklorish." Bildor took another drink. "What is the name of the blacksmith in the village?" Spigot nodded. "That's Ned Semmel, down by the green. Of course, he's real busy right now, what with the harvest and all." "I have some work for him." Bildor got up and strode away towards the gate. "Bill?" He stopped. "Yes?" "You can leave the brandy behind, then." Oh, God. The village forge was dark and stifling in the heat. But Bill Dorr had very good eyesight. Sorry about the coughing. Something moved among a complicated heap of metal. It turned out to be the lower half of a man. His upper body was somewhere in the machinery, from which came the occasional grunt. A hand shot out as Bill Dorr approached. "Right, give me the 3/8 Gripply." Bill looked around. A variety of tools were strewn around the forge. Come on, said the voice from somewhere in the machine. Bill selected a piece of shaped metal at random, placed it in the hand. It was drawn inside. There was a metallic noise and a grunt. I said a Gripply! This isn't a... There was a scringing noise of a piece of metal giving way. My thumb, you made me! And then there was a clang. Darn, that was my head! Now look what you made me do! And the ratchet spring snapped off in the trunnion armature again. Do you realize? No, I am sorry. There was a pause. Is that you, young Egbert? No, it is me, old Bill Dorr. There was a series of thumps and twanging noises as the top half of the human extricated itself from the machinery and turned out to belong to a young man with black curly hair, black face, black shirt, and black apron. He wiped a cloth across his face, leaving a pink smear, and blinked the sweat out of his eyes. Who are you? Good old Bill Dorr, working for Miss Flitworth. Oh, yes, man in the fire, the here the hour, I heard. Put it there. He extended a black hand. Bill Dorr looked at it blankly. I am sorry. I still do not know what a 3/8 Gripply is. I mean your hand, Mr. Dorr. Bill Dorr hesitated and then put his hand on the young man's palm. The oil-rimmed eyes glazed for a moment as the brain overruled the sense of touch, and then the smith smiled. The name's Simon. What do you think? It's a good name. No, I mean the machine. Pretty, ingenious, eh? Bill Dorr regarded it with polite incomprehension. It looked, at first sight, like a portable windmill that had been attacked by an enormous insect, and at second sight, like a touring torture chamber for an inquisition that wanted to get out and about a bit and enjoy the fresh air. Mysterious jointed arms stuck out at various angles. There were belts and long springs. The whole thing was mounted on spiked metal wheels. Of course, you're not seeing it at its best when it's standing still, said Simnel. It needs a horse to pull it. At the moment, anyway, I've got one or two rather radical ideas in that direction, he added dreamily. Is it a device of some sort? Simnel looked mildly affronted. I prefer the term machine, he said. It will revolutionize farming methods and drag them kicking and screaming into the century of the fruit bat. My folk have had this forge for 300 years, but Ned Simnel doesn't intend to spend the rest of his life nailing bits of bent metal onto horses, I can tell you. Bill looked at him blankly. Then he bent down and glanced under the machine. A dozen sickles were bolted to a big horizontal wheel. Ingenious linkages took power from the wheels via a selection of pulleys to a whirligig arrangement of metal arms. He began to experience a horrible feeling about the thing in front of him, but he asked anyway. Well, the heart of it all is this camshaft, said Simnel, gratified at the interest. The power comes up via the pulley here, and the cams move to the swagging arms, that's these things, and the combing gate, which is operated by the reciprocating mechanism, comes down just as the gripping shutter drops into this slot here, and of course, at the same time, the two brass balls go round and round, and the fletching sheets carry off the straw, while the grain drops with the aid of gravity down the riffing screw and into the hopper. Simple. And the 3/8 Gripply? Good job, you reminded me. Simnel fished up around the debris on the floor, picked up a small knurled object, and screwed it onto a protruding piece of the mechanism. Very important job. It stops the elliptical cam gradually sliding up the beam shaft, catching onto the flange rebate, with disastrous results, as you can no doubt imagine. Simnel stood back and wiped his hands on a cloth, making them slightly more oily. I'm calling it the combination harvester, he said. Bill Dorr felt very old. In fact, he was very old, but he'd never felt it as much as this. Somewhere in the shadow of his soul, he knew that, without the blacksmith explaining, what it was the combination harvester was supposed to do. Oh. We're going to give it a trial run this afternoon in the old Peedberry's big field. Looks very promising, I must say. What you're looking at now, Mr. Dorr, is the future. Yes. Bill Dorr ran his hand over the framework. And the harvest itself? No, what about it? What will it think of it? Will it know? Simnel wrinkled his nose. No, it won't know anything. Corn's corn. And sixpence is sixpence? Exactly. Simnel hesitated. What was it you were wanting? The tall figure ran a disconsolate finger over the oily mechanism. Mr. Dorr? Pardon? Oh, yes, I had something for you to do. He strode out of the forge and returned almost immediately with something wrapped in silk. He unwrapped it carefully. He had made a new handle for the blade, not a straight one, such as they used in the mountains, but the heavy double-curved handle of the plains. You want it beaten out? New grass nail? Metalwork replacing? Bill Dorr shook his head. I want it killed. Killed? Yes, totally. Every bit destroyed, so that it is absolutely dead. Nice scythe, said Simnel. Seems a shame. You've kept a good edge on it. Don't touch it. Simnel sucked at his finger. Funny, he said. I could have sworn I didn't touch it. My hand was inches away. Well, it's sharp anyway. He swished it through the air. Yes, pretty sharp, I'd say. He paused, stuck his little finger in his ear, and swiveled it around a bit. You sure you know what you want? He said. Bill Dorr solemnly repeated his request. Simnel shrugged. Well, I suppose I could melt it down and burn the handle, he said. Yes. Well, okay, it's your scythe, and you're basically right, of course. This is old technology now. Redundant. I fear you may be right. Simnel jerked a grimy thumb towards the combination harvester. Bill Dorr knew it was made only of metal and canvas, and therefore couldn't possibly lurk. But it was lurking. Moreover, it was doing so with a chilling, metallic smugness. You could get Miss Flitworth to buy one of these, Mr. Dorr. It'd be just the job for a one-man farm like that. I can see you now, up there in the breeze with the belts clacking away and the spar arms oscillating. No. Go on, she can afford it, and they say she's got boxes full of treasure from the old days. No. Simnel hesitated. That last no contained a threat more certain than the creak of thin ice on a deep river. It said that going any further could be the most foolhardy thing that Simnel would ever do. I'm sure you know your own mind best, he mumbled. Yes. Then it'll be, call it a farthing for the scythe, Simon gabbled. Sorry about that, but it'll use a lot of coals, you see, and those dwarves keep winding up the price of... Here, it must be done by tonight. Simnel didn't argue. Arguing would mean that Bill Dorr remained in the forge, and he was getting quite anxious that this should not be so. Fine. You understand? Right. Farewell, said Bill Dorr solemnly, and left. Simnel shut the doors after him and leaned against them. Whew. Nice man, of course. Everyone was talking about him. It was just that after a couple of minutes, in his presence, you got a pins and needles sensation that someone was walking over your grave, and it hasn't even been dug yet. He wandered across the oily floor, filled the tea kettle, and wedged it on a corner of the forge. He picked up a spanner to do some final adjustments to the combination harvester, and spotted the scythe leaning against the wall. He tiptoed towards it, and then realized that tiptoeing was an amazingly stupid thing to do. It wasn't alive, it couldn't hear, it just looked sharp. He raised the spanner and felt guilty about it, but Mr. Dorr had said something very odd, using the wrong sort of words to use in talking about a mere implement, but he could hardly object to this. He brought the spanner down hard. There was no resistance. He would have sworn, again, that the spanner sheared in two, as though it was made of bread several inches from the edge of the blade. He wondered if something could be so sharp that it began to possess not just a sharp edge, but the very essence of sharpness itself, in a field of absolute sharpness that actually extended beyond the last atoms of metal. Bloody hellfire! And then he remembered that this was sloppy and superstitious thinking for a man who knew how to bevel a 3/8 Gripply. You knew where you were with a reciprocating linkage. It either worked, or it didn't. It certainly didn't present you with mysteries. He looked proudly at the combination harvester. Of course, you'd need a horse to pull it. That spoiled things a bit. Horses belonged to yesterday. Tomorrow belonged to the combination harvester and its descendants, which would make the world a cleaner and better place. It was just a matter of taking the horse out of the equation. You tried clockwork, and that wasn't powerful enough. Maybe if you tried winding Behind him, the kettle boiled over and put the fire out. Simnel fought his way through the steam. That was the bloody trouble every time. Whenever someone was trying to do a bit of sensible thinking, there was always some pointless distraction. I'm just grabbing my phone in case I need it. Ugh. Miss Cake drew the curtains. Who exactly is One Man Bucket? Said Wendell. She lit a couple of candles and sat down. He belonged to one of the Ease and Hondawanda tribes, she said shortly. Very strange name, One Man Bucket, said Wendell. It's not his full name, said Miss Cake darkly. No, we've got the old Anne's. She looked at him speculatively. We need someone else. I could call Schleppel, said Wendell. I ain't having no bogey under my table trying to look at me drawers, said Miss Cake. Ludmilla, she shouted. After a moment or two, the bee curtain leading into the kitchen was swept aside, and the young woman who had originally opened the door to Wendell came in. Yes, Mother. Sit down, girl. We need another one for the seancing. Yes, Mother. The girl smiled at Wendell. This is Ludmilla, said Miss Cake shortly. Charmed, I'm sure, said Wendell. Ludmilla gave him the bright crystalline smile perfected by people who had long ago learned not to let their feelings show. We have already met, said Wendell. Must be at least a day since full moon, he thought. All the signs are nearly gone. Nearly? Well, well, well. She's my shame, said Miss Cake. Mother, you do go on, said Ludmilla, without rancor. Join hands, said Miss Cake. They sat in the semi-darkness. Then Wendell felt Mrs. Cake's hand being pulled away. I forgot about the gloss, she said. I thought, Miss Cake, that you didn't hold with Ouija boards and that sort of... Wendell began. There was a glugging noise from the sideboard, and Miss Cake put a full glass on the tablecloth and sat down. I don't, she said. Silence descended again. Wendell cleared his throat nervously. Eventually, Miss Cake said, All right, One Man Bucket. I knows you're there. The glass moved. The amber liquid inside sloshed gently. A bodiless voice quavered, Greetings, pale face, from the happy hunting ground. You stop that, said Miss Cake. Everyone knows you got run over by a cart in Treacle Street because you was drunk, One Man Bucket. It's not my fault, It's my fault. My great-granddad moved here. By rights, I should have been mauled to death by a mountain lion or a giant mammoth or something. I've been denied my death right. Mr. Poons here wants to ask you a question, One Man Bucket, said Miss Cake. She is happy here and waiting for you to join her, said One Man Bucket. Who is? Said Wendell. This seemed to fox One Man Bucket. It was a line that generally satisfied without further explanation. Who would you like? He asked cautiously. Can I have that drink now? Not yet, One Man Bucket, said Miss Cake. Well, I need it. It's bloody crowded in here. What? Said Wendell quickly. With ghosts, you mean? There's hundreds of them, said the voice of One Man Bucket. Wendell was disappointed. Only hundreds, he said? That doesn't sound like a lot. Not many people become ghosts, said Miss Cake. To be a ghost, you have to have, serious unfinished business, or a terrible revenge to take, or a cosmic purpose for which you're just a pawn. Or a cruel thirst, said One Man Bucket. Will you hark at him, said Miss Cake. I wanted to stay in the spirit world, or even wine and beer. Ha ha ha. So what happens in the life force if things stop living, said Wendell. Is that what's causing all this trouble? You tell the man, said Miss Cake, when One Man Bucket seemed reluctant to answer. What trouble are you talking about? Things unscrewing, clothes coming running around by themselves, everyone feeling more alive, that sort of thing. That's nothing, see? Life force leaks back where it can. You don't need to worry about that. Wendell put his hand over the glass. But there's something I should be worrying about, isn't there? He said flatly. It's to do with the little glass souvenirs. Don't like to say. Do tell him. It was Ludmilla's voice, deep but somehow attractive. Lupin was watching her intently. Wendell smiled. That was one of the advantages about being dead. You spotted things the living ignored. One-Man Bucket sounded shrill and petulant. What is he gonna do if I tell him then? I could get into a heap of trouble for that sort of thing. Well, can you tell me if I guess right? Said Wendell. Yes, maybe. You don't have to say anything, said Miss Cake. Just knock twice for yes and once for no, like in the old days. No, all right. Go on, Mr. Poons, said Ludmilla. She had the kind voice Wendell wanted to stroke. He cleared his throat. I think, he began. That is, I think they're some sort of eggs. I thought, why breakfast? And then I thought, eggs. Knock. Oh, well, perhaps it was a rather silly idea. Sorry, was it once for yes or twice for no? Twice! Snapped the medium. Knock, knock. Ugh, breathed Wendell, and they hatch into something with wheels on. Twice for yes, was it? Right! Knock, knock. I thought so. I found one under my floor that tried to hatch and there wasn't enough room, crowed Wendell. But then he frowned. But hatch into what? Mustrum Ridcully trotted into his study and took his wizard staff from its rack over the fireplace. He licked his finger and gingerly touched the top of the staff. There was a small octarine spark and a smell of greasy tin. He headed back for the door. Then he turned around slowly because his brain had just had time to analyze the study's cluttered contents and spot the oddity. What the hell's that doing there? He said. He prodded it with the tip of his staff. It gave a jingling noise and rolled a little way. It looked vaguely, but not much, like the sort of thing the maids trundle around loaded with mops and fresh linen and whatever else maids pushed around. Ridcully made a mental note to take it up with the housekeeper. Then he forgot about it. Damn wire wheelie things getting everywhere, he muttered. Upon the word damn, something like a large blue bottle with cat-sized dentures flopped out of the air, fluttered madly as it took stock of its surroundings, and then flew after the unheeding Arch-Chancellor. The word of wizards have power, and swear words have power, and with life force practically crystallizing out of the air, it had to find its outlets wherever it could. Cities, said One-Man Bucket. I think they're city eggs. The senior wizards gathered again in the great hall. Even the senior wrangler was feeling a certain excitement. It was considered bad form to use magic against fellow wizards, and using it against civilians was unsporting. It did you good to have a really good righteous zap occasionally. The Arch-Chancellor looked them over. Dean, why have you got stripes all over your face? He inquired. Camouflage, Arch-Chancellor. Camouflage, eh? Yo, Arch-Chancellor! Oh, well, so long as you feel happy in yourself, that's what matters. They crept out towards the patch of ground that had been Moto's little territory. At least, most of them crept. The Dean advanced in a series of spinning leaps, occasionally flattening himself against the wall, and saying, hut, 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 under his breath. He was absolutely crestfallen when the other heaps turned out to be still where Moto had built them. The gardener, who had tagged along behind and had nearly twice been flattened by the Dean, fussed around for a while. They're just laying low, said the Dean. I say we blow up the goddamn... They're not even warm yet, said Moto. That one must have been the oldest. You mean we haven't got anything to fight, said the Arch-Chancellor. The ground shook underfoot, and then there was a faint jangling noise from the direction of the cloisters. Ridcully frowned. Someone's pushing those damn wire baskety things around again, he said. There was one in my study tonight. Huh, said the senior wrangler. There was one in my bedroom. I opened up the wardrobe, and there it was. In your wardrobe? What did you put in there? What did you put in there for? Said Ridcully. I didn't. I told you. It's probably the students. It's their kind of humor. One of them put a hairbrush in my bed once. I fell over one earlier, said the Arch-Chancellor, and then when I looked around for it, someone had taken it away. The jingling noise got closer. Right, Mr. So-called clever Dick young fella, me lad, said Ridcully, tapping his staff once or twice on his palm in a meaningful way. The wizards backed up against the wall. The phantom trolley pusher was almost upon them. Ridcully snarled and leapt out of hiding. Aha, my fine young bloody hellfire! Don't be pulling my leg, said Miss Cake. Cities ain't alive. I know people says they are, but they don't mean really. Windlepoons turned one of the snowballs around in his hand. It must be laying thousands of them, he said. But they wouldn't all survive, of course. Otherwise, we'd be up to here in cities, yes? You're telling me these little balls hatch into huge places? Said Ludmilla. Not straight away. There's the mobile stage first. Something with wheels on, said Windle. That's right. See, you know already. I think I knew, said Windlepoons, but I didn't understand. What happens after the mobile stage? Don't know. Windle stood up. Then it's time to find out, he said. He glanced at Ludmilla and Lupine. Ah, yes, and why not? If you can help somebody as you pass this way, Windle thought, then your living or whatever shall not be in vain. He let himself fall into a stoop and let a little crackle enter his voice. But I'm rather unsteady on my legs these days, he quavered. It would really be a great favor if someone could help me along. Could you see me as far as the university, young lady? Ludmilla doesn't go out much these days because of her health, Miss Cake began briskly. Is absolutely fine, said Ludmilla. Mother, you know it's been a whole day since the full moon. Ludmilla! Well, it has. It's not safe for a young woman to walk the streets these days, said Miss Cake. But Mr. Poons's wonderful dog would frighten away the most dangerous criminal, said Ludmilla. On cue, Lupine barked helpfully and begged. Miss Cake regarded him critically. He's certainly a very obedient animal, she said reluctantly. That's settled then, said Ludmilla. I'll fetch my shawl. Lupine rolled over. Windle nudged at him with a foot. Be good, he said. There was a meaningful cough from one-man bucket. All right, said Miss Cake. She took a bundle of matches from the dresser, lit one absent-mindedly with her fingernail, and dropped it into the whiskey glass. It burned with a blue flame, and somewhere in the spirit world, the specter of a stiff double lasted just long enough. As Windlepoon left the house, he thought he could hear a ghostly voice raised in song. The trolley stopped. It swiveled from side to side, as if observing the wizards. Then it did a fast three-point turn and trundled off at high speed. Get it! Bellowed the Arch-Chancellor. He aimed his staff and got off a fireball which turned a small area of cobblestones into something yellow and bubbly. The speeding trolley rocked wildly but kept going, with one wheel rattling and squeaking. It's from the dungeon dimension, said the Dean. Cream the basket. The Arch-Chancellor laid a steady hand on his shoulder. Don't be daft. Dungeon things have a lot more tentacles than things. They don't look made. They turned at the sound of another trolley. It rattled unconcernedly down a side passage, stopped when it saw, or otherwise perceived the wizards, and did a creditable impression of a trolley that had just been left there by someone. The Bursar crept up to it. It's no use looking like that, he said. We know you can move. We all seed you, said the Dean. The trolley maintained a low profile. You can't be thinking, said the lecturer in recent runes. There's no room for a brain. And who says it's thinking, says the Arch-Chancellor. All it does is move. Who needs brains for that? Prawns move. He ran his finger over the metalwork. Actually, prawns are quite intelligent, said the senior wrangler began. Shut up, said Ridcully. Is this made, though? It's wire, said the senior wrangler. Wire's something you have to make, and there's wheels. Hardly anything natural's got wheels. It's just that up close it looks all one thing, said the lecturer in recent runes, who had knelt down painfully to inspect it better. Like one unit, made all in one lump, like a machine that's been grown. But that's ridiculous. Maybe. Isn't there a sort of cuckoo in the ramtops that builds clocks to nest in, said the Bursar. Yes, but that's just a courtship ritual, said the lecturer in recent runes airily. Besides, they keep lousy time. The trolley leapt for a gap in the wizards and would have made it, except that gap was occupied by the Bursar, who gave a scream and pitched forward into the basket. The trolley didn't stop, but rattled onward, towards the gates. The Dean raised his staff. The Arch-Chancellor grabbed it. You might hit the bursar, he said. Just one small fireball? It's tempting, but no. Come on, after it. Yo! If you like. The wizards lumbered in pursuit. Behind them, as yet unnoticed, a whole flock of the Arch-Chancellor's swear words fluttered and buzzed, and Wendell Poons was leading a small deputation to the library. The librarian of the unseen university knuckled his way hurriedly across the floor as the door shook to a thunderous knocking. "I know you're in there," came the voice of Wendell Poons. "You must let us in. It's vitally important." "Ook! You won't open the doors?" "Ook! Then you leave me no choice." Ancient blocks of masonry moved aside slowly. Mortar crumbled. Then a part of the wall fell in, leaving Wendell Poons standing in a Wendell Poons-shaped hole. He coughed on the dust. "I hate having to do that," he said. "I can't help feeling it's pandering to popular prejudice." The librarian landed on his shoulders. To the orangutan's surprise, this made very little difference. A 300-pound orangutan usually had a noticeable effect on a person's rate of progress, but Wendell wore him like a collar. "I think we need ancient history," he said. "I wonder, could you stop trying to twist my head off?" The librarian looked around wildly. It was a technique that normally never failed. Then his nostrils flared. The librarian hadn't always been an ape. A magical library is a dangerous place to work, and he'd been turned into an orangutan as a result of a magical explosion. He'd been quite inoffensive human, although by now so many people had come to terms with his new shape that few people remembered it, but with the change had come the key to a whole bundle of senses and racial memories. And one of the deepest, most fundamental, and most born in the bone of all of them was to do with shapes. It went back to the dawn of sapience. Shapes with muzzles, teeth, and forelegs were, in the evolving simian mind, definitely filed under bad news. A very large wolf had padded through the hole in the wall, followed by an attractive young woman. The librarian's signal input was temporarily fused. "Also," said Wendell, it is just possible that I could notch your arms behind you." "Deke! He's not an ordinary wolf. You better believe it." "Ook?" Wendell lowered his voice. "And she might not technically be a woman," he added. The librarian looked at Ludmilla. His nostrils flared again. His brow wrinkled. "Ook? All right, I may have put that rather clumsily. Do let go. There's a good fellow." The librarian released his grip very cautiously and sank to the floor, keeping Wendell between himself and Lupine. Wendell brushed mortar fragments off the remains of his robe. "We need to find out," he said, "about the lives of cities. Specifically, I need to know." There was a faint jangling noise. A wire basket rolled nonchalantly around the massive stack of the nearest bookcase. It was full of books. It stopped as soon as it realized that it had been seen and contrived to look as though it had never moved at all. "The mobile stage," breathed Wendell Poons. The wire basket tried to inch backward without appearing to move. Lupine growled. "Is that what One Man Bucket was talking about?" said Ludmilla. The trolley vanished. The librarian grunted and went after it. "Oh yes, something that would make itself useful," said Wendell, suddenly almost manically cheerful. "That's how it'd work. First, something that you'd want to keep, put it away somewhere. Thousands wouldn't get the right conditions, but that wouldn't matter because there would be thousands. And then the next stage would be something that would be handy and get everywhere, and no one would ever think it had got there by itself. But it's all happening at the wrong time. But how can a city be alive? It's only made up of dead parts," said Ludmilla. "So are people. Take it from me, I know. But you're right. I think it shouldn't be happening. It's all the extra life force. It's tipping the balance. It's turning something that isn't really real into a reality. And it's happening too early, and it's happening too fast." There was a squeal from the librarian. The trolley erupted from another row of shelves, wheels ablur, heading for the hole in the wall, with the orangutan hanging on grimly with one hand flapping behind it like a very fat flag. The wolf leapt. "Lupine!" shouted Wendell. But from the days when the first caveman rolled a slice of log down a hill, canines have also had a deep, racial urge to chase anything on wheels. Lupine was already snapping at the trolley. His jaws met on a wheel. There was a howl, a scream from the librarian, and Ape, Wolf, and Wire Basket ended up in a heap against the wall. Oh, the poor thing! Look at him! Ludmilla rushed across the floor and knelt down by the stricken wolf. It went right over his paws, look! And he's probably lost a couple of teeth, said Wendell. He helped the librarian up. There was a red glow in the ape's eyes. It had tried to steal his books. This is probably the best proof any wizard could require that the trolleys were brainless. He reached down and wrenched the wheels off the trolley. Olay, said Wendell. Ook? No, not with milk, said Wendell. Lupine was having his head cradled in Ludmilla's lap. He had lost a tooth, and his fur was a mess. He opened one eye and fixed Wendell with a conspiratorial yellow stare while his ears were stroked. There's a lucky dog, thought Wendell. He's going to push his luck and hold up a paw and whine. Right, said Wendell. Now, librarian, you were about to help us, I think. Poor brave dog, said Ludmilla. Lupine raised a paw pathetically and whined. Burdened by the screaming form of the bursar, the other wire basket couldn't get up to speed of its departed comrade. One wheel also trailed uselessly. It canted recklessly from side to side and nearly fell over as it shot through the grate, moving sideways. I can see it clear! I can see it clear! Screamed the dean. Don't! You might hit the bursar! Bellowed Ridcully. You might damage university property! But the dean couldn't hear the roar of unaccustomed testosterone. A searing green fireball struck the skewing trolley. The air was filled with flying wheels. Ridcully took a deep breath. You stupid! He screamed. The word he uttered was unfamiliar to those wizards who had not had his robust country upbringing and knew nothing of the finer points of animal husbandry, but it plopped into existence a few inches from his face. It was fat, round, black, and glossy, with horrible eyebrows. It blew him an insectile raspberry and flew up to join the little swarm of curses. What the hell was that? A smaller thing flashed into existence by his ear. Ridcully snatched at his hat. Damn! The swarm increased by one. Something just bit me. A squadron of newly hatched blastids made a valiant bid for freedom. He swatted at them ineffectually. Get away, you... Don't say it, said the senior wrangler. Shut up! People never told the Arch-Chancellor to shut up. Shutting up was something that happened to other people. He shut up out of shock. I mean, every time you swear it comes alive, said the senior wrangler hurriedly. Ghastly little winged things pop out of the air. Bloody hellfire, said the Arch-Chancellor. Pop, pop. The bursar crawled dazed out of the tangled wreckage of the wire trolley. He found his pointy hat, dusted it off, tried it on, frowned, took a wheel out of it. His colleagues didn't seem to be paying him much attention. He heard the Arch-Chancellor say, But I've always done it. Nothing wrong with a good swear. It keeps the blood flowing. Watch out, Dean. One of these Can't you say something else? Shouted the senior wrangler above the buzz and whine in the swarm. Like what? Darn. Darn? Yes, or maybe poot. Poot? You want me to say poot? The bursar crept up to the group. Arguing over petty details at times of dimensional emergency was a familiar wizardly trait. Miss Whitlow, the housekeeper, always says sugar when she drops something, he volunteered. The Arch-Chancellor turned on him. She may say sugar, he growled, but what she means is shit. The wizards ducked. Ridcully managed to stop himself. Oh, darn, he said miserably. The swear words settled amiably on his hat. They like you, said the dean. You're their daddy, said the lecturer in recent runes. Ridcully scowled. You boys can stop being silly at your Arch-Chancellor's expense and jolly well find out what's going on, he said. The wizards looked expectantly at the air. Nothing appeared. You're doing fine, said the lecturer in recent runes. Keep it up. Darn, 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 said the Arch-Chancellor. Sugar, sugar, sugar. Pooty, poot, pooty, poot. He shook his head. It's no good. It doesn't relieve my feelings one bit. It's cleared the air, at any rate, said the bursar. They noticed his presence for the first time. They looked at the remains of the trolley. Things zooming around, said Ridcully. Things coming alive. They looked up at a suddenly familiar squeaking noise. Two more wheeled baskets rattled across the square outside the gates. One was full of fruit. The other was half full of fruit and half full of small, screaming child. The wizards watched, open-mouthed. A stream of people were galloping after the trolleys. Slightly in the lead, elbows scything through the air, a desperate and determined woman pounded past the university gates. The Arch-Chancellor grabbed a heavy-set man who was lumbering along gamely at the back of the crowd. "What happened? I was just loading up some peaches in that basket thing when it upped and ran away on me. What about the child?" "Search me. The woman had one of the baskets and she bought some peaches off me and..." They all turned. A basket rattled out of the mouth of an alleyway, saw them, turned smartly, and shot off across the square. "But why?" said Red Cully. "They're so handy to put things in, right?" said the man. "I got to get them peaches. You know how they bruise." "And they're all going in the same direction," said the lecturer in recent runes. "Anyone else notice that?" "After them!" screamed the dean. The other wizards, too bewildered to argue, lumbered after him. "No," Red Cully began, and realized that it was hopeless, and he was losing the initiative. He carefully formulated the most genteel battle cry in the history of boulderism. "Darn them to heck!" he yelled, and ran after the dean. Bill Dorr worked through the long, heavy afternoon at the head of a trail of binders and stackers, until there was a shout, and the men ran towards the hedge. Iago Peedbury's big field was right on the other side. His farmhands were wheeling the combination harvester through the gate. Bill joined the others leaning over the hedge. The distant figure of Simnel could be seen, giving instructions. A frightened horse was backed into the shafts. The blacksmith climbed into the little metal seat in the middle of the machinery and took up the reins. The horse walked forward. The sparge arms unfolded. The canvas sheet started to revolve. And probably the riffing screw was turning, but that didn't matter because something somewhere went clonk and everything stopped. From the crowd at the hedge there were shouts of, "Get out and milk it! We had one, but the end fell off. 2 pence more, and up goes the donkey," and other time-honored witticisms. Simnel got down, held a whispered conversation with Peedbury and his men, then disappeared into the machinery for a moment. "That'll never fly! Veal will be cheap tomorrow." This time the combination harvester got several feet before one of the rotating sheets split and folded up. By now some of the older men at the hedge were doubled up with laughter. "Any old iron, 6 pence a load. Fetch the other one, this one's broke." Simnel got down again. Distant catcalls drifted toward him as he untied the sheet and replaced it with a new one. He ignored them. Without moving his gaze from the scene in the opposite field, Bill Dorr pulled a sharpening stone out of his pocket and began to hone his scythe, slowly and deliberately. Apart from the distant clink of the blacksmith's tools, the ship of the stone on metal was the only sound in the heavy air. Simnel climbed back on the harvester and nodded to the man leading the horse. "Here we go again! Any more for a skylark? Put a sock in it!" The cries trailed off. Half a dozen pairs of eyes followed the combination harvester up the field, stared at it while it was turned around on the headland, and watched it come back again. It clicked past, reciprocating and oscillating. At the bottom of the field, it turned around neatly. It whirred by again. After a while, one of the watchers said gloomily, "They'll never catch on, you mark my words." "Right enough, who's gonna want to buy a gadget like that?" said another. "Sure, it's only like a big clock, can't do anything more than go up and down a field very fast, cutting corn like that and stripping the grain off. It's done 3 rows already. Bugger me! You can't see the bits move. What do you think of that, Bill?" "Bill?" They looked around. He was already halfway up his second row, but accelerating. Miss Flitworth opened the door a fraction. "Yes?" she said suspiciously. It's Bill Dorr, Miss Flitworth. We brought him home." She opened the door wider. "What happened to him?" The two men shuffled in awkwardly, trying to support a figure a foot taller than they were. It raised its head and squinted muzzily at Miss Flitworth. "Don't know what come over him," said Duke Bottomley. "He's a devil for working," said William Spigot. "You're getting your money's worth out of him, all right, Miss Flitworth." "It'll be the first time, then, in these parts," she said sourly. "Up and down the field like a madman, trying to do better than that contraption of Ned Simnel's. Took 4 of us to do the binding. Nearly beat it, too." put him down on the sofa. He told him he was doing too much in all the sun. Duke craned his neck around to see the kitchen, in case the jewels and treasure were hanging out in dressers and drawers. Miss Flitworth eclipsed his view. I'm sure you did, thank you. Now I expect you'll be wanting to be off home. If there's anything we can do, I know where you live, and you ain't paid no rent for 5 years, too. Goodbye, Mr. Spigot. She ushered them to the door and shut it in their faces. Then she turned around. What the hell have you been doing, Mr. So-called Bill Dorr? I am tired, and it won't stop. Bill Dorr clutched his skull. Also, Spigot gave me a humorous apple juice fermented drink because of the heat, and now I feel ill. I ain't surprised. He makes it up in the woods. Apples isn't the half of it. I have never felt ill before, or tired. It's all part of being alive. How do humans stand it? Well, fermented apple juice can help. Bill Dorr sat staring gloomily at the floor. But we finished the field, he said, with a hint of triumph, and stacked all in stooks, or possibly the other way around. He clutched his skull again. Ugh. Miss Flitworth disappeared into the scullery. There was a creaking of a pump. She returned with a damp flannel and a glass of water. There's a newt in it! Shows it's fresh, said Miss Flitworth. People have believed for hundreds of years that newts in a well mean that the water's fresh and drinkable, and in all that time, never asked themselves whether the newts got out to go to the lavatory. Ugh. Shows it's fresh, said Miss Flitworth, fishing the amphibian out and releasing it into the flagstones, where it scuttled away into a crack. Bill Dorr tried to stand up. Now I almost know why some people wish to die, he said. I had heard of pain and misery, but I had not hitherto fully understood what they meant. Miss Flitworth peered through the dusty window. The clouds that had been piling up all afternoon towered over the hills, gray with a menacing hint of yellow. The heat pressed down like a vice. There's a big storm coming. Will it spoil my harvest? No, it'll dry out after. How is the child? Bill Dorr unfolded his palm. Miss Flitworth raised her eyebrows. The golden glass was there, the top bulb almost empty, but it shimmered in and out of vision. How come you got it? It's upstairs. She was holding it she floundered, like someone holds something very tightly. She still is, but it is also here, or anywhere. It is only a metaphor, after all. What she's holding looks real enough. Just because something is a metaphor doesn't mean it can't be real. Miss Flitworth was aware of a faint echo in the voice, as if the words were being spoken by two people almost, but not quite in sync. How long have you got? A matter of hours. And the scythe? I gave the blacksmith strict instructions. She frowned. I'm not saying young Semnol's that he's a bad lad, but are you sure he'll do it? It's asking a lot of a man like him to destroy something like that. I had no choice. The little furnace here isn't good enough. It's a wicked sharp scythe. I fear it may not be sharp enough. And no one's ever tried this on you? There is a saying, you can't take it with you? Yes? How many people have seriously believed it? I remember reading once, said Miss Flitworth, about these heathen kings in the desert, someone who built huge pyramids and put all sorts of stuff in them. Even boats, even gels and transparent trousers and a couple of saucepan lids. You can't tell me that's right. I've never been very sure about what is right, said Bill Dorr. I am not sure there is such a thing as right or wrong, just places to stand. No, right's right and wrong's wrong, said Miss Flitworth. I was brought up to tell the difference. By a contrabandistor. A what? A mover of contraband. There's nothing wrong with smuggling. I merely point out that some people think otherwise. They don't count. But Lightning struck somewhere on the hill. The thunderclap rocked the house. A few bricks from the chimney rattled down into the grate. Then the windows shook to a fierce pounding. Bildor strode across the room and threw open the door. Hailstones the size of hens' eggs bounced off the doorstep into the kitchen. Oh, drama. Oh, hell! Miss Flitworth ducked under his arm. And where's the wind come from? The sky, said Bildor, surprised at the sudden excitement. Come on! She whirled back into the kitchen and scrabbled on the dresser for a candle, lantern, and some matches. But you said it would dry. In a normal storm, yes. In this lot, it's going to be ruined. We'll find it spread all over the hill in the morning. She fumbled the candle light and then ran back again. Bildor looked out into the storm, straws whirring past, tumbling on the gale. Ruined? My harvest? He straightened up. Bugger that! The hail rumbled on the roof of the smithy. Ned Simnel pumped the furnace bellows until the heart of the coals was white with the merest hint of yellow. It had been a good day. The combination harvester had worked better than he dared to hope. Old Petebury had insisted on keeping it to do another field tomorrow, so it had been left out with a tarpaulin over it, securely tied down. Tomorrow he could teach one of the men to use it and start work on a new, improved model. Success was assured. The future definitely lay ahead. Then there was the matter of the scythe. He went to the wall where it had been hung. Bit of a mystery, that. Here was the most superb instrument of its kind he'd ever seen. You couldn't even blunt it. Its sharpness extended well beyond its actual edge. And yet, he was supposed to destroy it. Where was the sense in that? Ned Simnel was a great believer in sense, of a certain specialized kind. Maybe Bildor just wanted to be rid of it, and that was understandable, because even now, when it was hung innocuously enough from the wall, it seemed to radiate sharpness. There was a faint, violent corona around the blade, caused by the drafts in the room driving luckless air molecules to their severed death. Ned Simnel picked it up with great care. Weird fellow, Bildor. He'd said he wanted to be sure that it was absolutely dead. As if you could kill a thing. Anyway, how can anyone destroy it? Oh, the handle would burn and the metal would calcine, and if you worked hard enough, eventually there'd be nothing more than a little heap of dust and ashes. That's what the customer wanted. On the other hand, presumably you could destroy it by taking the blade off the handle. After all, it wouldn't be a scythe if you did that. It'd just be, well, bits. Certainly you could make a scythe out of them, but you could probably do that with the dust and ashes if you knew how to do it. Ned Simnel was quite pleased with his line of argument. And after all, Bildor hadn't even asked for proof that the thing had been killed. He took sight carefully and then used the scythe to chop off the end of the anvil. Uncanny. Total sharpness. He gave in. It was unfair. You couldn't ask someone like him to destroy something like this. It was like a work of art. It was better than that. It was a work of craft. He walked across the room to a stack of timber and thrust the scythe well out of the way behind the heap. There was a brief, punctured squeak. Anyway, it would be all right. He'd give Bill his farthing back in the morning. The death of rats materialized behind the heap in the forge and trudged to the sad little heap of fur that had been a rat that got in the way of the scythe. Its ghost was standing beside it, looking apprehensive. It didn't seem very pleased to see him. Squeak, squeak? Squeak, the death of rats explained. Squeak! Squeak, the death of rats confirmed. Preen's whiskers, twitch his nose. The death of rats shook his head. Squeak. The rat was crestfallen. The death of rats laid a bony, but not entirely unkind paw on its shoulder. Squeak. The rat nodded sadly. It had been a good life in the forge. Ned's housekeeping was almost non-existent, and he was probably the world champion and absent-minded leaver of unfinished sandwiches. It shrugged and trooped off after the small-robed figure. Wasn't as if it had any choice. Alright, I think that's where we're going to end this reading for today. On page 240 out of 353. So we have a little bit over 100 pages left. We're making good progress, and I hope you guys are enjoying the story so far.